Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another edition of the Chris Grant Podcast. I've been wanting to do this video for a while now, and I just haven't had the time, but I do now. So a lot of you have already seen my video about radio ads and maybe holding off a little bit before you go ahead and purchase those radio ads, especially as a small business owner. If you haven't seen that video yet, it's down in the description. You can watch this one and that one in that order, or you can go watch that one and come back to this one. It's really not going to matter. They're similar but different at the same time. That one is, of course, about buying radio ads. This one is more about deciding whether or not to have a career in radio. I've got a little bit of personal experience to offer as far as that goes. I've done a little bit of research, to support what I'm saying and kind of explore that idea a little more. So I'm really looking forward to kind of getting into this with you. If at any point in time, you like the video, feel free to like, subscribe, and share. Let people know. If you disagree with me, comment down below. I'm certainly I'm not the be-all, end-all of this. There's a lot of opinions out there, so you have an opinion. I'd like to hear yours. Sit back, let's explore this together, let's have a good time, and thank you for watching. I think I'll get started with my personal experience, which was growing up as a kid and collecting baseball cards, having a good time, and I always had that radio next to me when I was doing all these things. Radio was a free form of music for me. It was a way that I could learn about new music for free. I did not grow up in a rich household. I needed free media at my disposal. I had a few tapes here and there, cassette tapes, and later on I had a few CDs, and that collection grew, and of course I had some vinyl as well. But overall, radio was where I heard all my new music. And it was responsible for so many of my experiences too, when I think about it. That was my experience. That's how I fell in love with radio when I was a kid. I remember the radio jocks being, you just looked up to them so much. They were at all the shows. They were the coolest. They would intro all the bands, and they were always kind of behind that fourth wall. They were untouchable to a degree, right? You'd only see them in certain situations. They were like rock stars of the community. And so that was appealing too, to look at them and also want to be a rock star of the community in that way. And so, it was just a very special position to hold. You had to know somebody who knew somebody, etc. And I'm not saying it's not now, but it is definitely different. And I think I think there's a movie out there that talks about this. It's funny because it talks about the era before the era that I'm talking about. So even way back in the day, they were already discussing how radio wasn't like it used to be. So I'm just a reiteration of this conversation over and over. But anyway, radio compared, most of my listening happened in the 90s. So radio, now compared to the 90s is quite different. Of course, there's so many more options now that people have, when it comes to listening services, streaming services, etc. I mean, you don't have to click on the radio. And so many of these options now have no ads, or are very, very cheap. YouTube Music is a great example. You pay for YouTube Music, you also get no ads on videos. It's pretty affordable, and that's it. And it arguably plays a better mix and you don't have to hear the DJ talking. Now, I'll get into that too. I'm not against radio DJs, believe me. I've been one. But I do have some thoughts on radio DJs and how they do their job, etc., and how I did my job. But, just there's so many more options available now when it comes to, radio, that it's not as special. It's not as cool, dare I say, to be a radio jock as it used to be. The fourth wall has, kind of come down too. Everybody at this point, at this stage of the game, kind of has a background in production. So, there are a lot of things you can do. A lot of things you could do in the 90s, on big expensive equipment, you can do on an iPhone now. So things have changed as far as infrastructure and things like that are concerned too. And in fact, that makes me think about, how a lot of younger people are probably, vastly smarter and technology savvy than a lot of the people who hold high positions at these radio stations, who have been there for a long, long time. That's really, really cool to think about with this up-and-coming generation. But it would also be very, very frustrating to be in that position as a young person and, trying to get ahead in this field you've always wanted to be in and being smarter than your superiors. So let's talk about my background a little bit for some credibility here, and also maybe some discredibility. I don't know everything about the radio industry, and I only made it as far as I made it. So I can only give you that perspective from my personal experience, mixed with, like I said, a little bit of research that I've done, mixed with some common knowledge, things like that. So my experience with radio was a good one for the most part. I was essentially recruited by a couple people from the station. I had been doing my own thing as a mobile DJ for a long time, and also a turntablist at bars and things like that. I hosted some karaoke. I had worked in professional sports. So I did all that before I ever got into radio, which I don't know. I feel like that's not the traditional path. I feel like typically for people, radio opens up those avenues maybe. But for me, it was different. So they recruited me. They wanted somebody, they were thinking about having somebody do a mix show on 92.9 The Beat in Springfield, Missouri. And, I was DJing out at a bar, and the program director at the time and a friend of mine who also worked at the station both saw me, and the program director liked it. And they didn't hire me right off the bat though. I had to do quite a few things. I had to submit a demo. They had to run it by, people up top. They had to do a lot of things to get me in the system, so to speak. So they did all that. They said, hey, this guy can do it. He can produce this show. He's got, production skills, whatever. And they brought me on. So when I first started, they brought me on to produce my mix show, which was it was an hour. It was an hour mix show on the weekends, right before Ghetto House Radio. It was, it was really, really cool. I loved doing that mix show. Started out with an hour, and then, if I'm not mistaken, they got a new program director at the station. Yes, they got a new program director, a guy who'd been in radio for a long, long time. And he decided to get rid of one of the mix shows that was on the station at the time, and almost got rid of mine. But I just wrote him an email, said how much I enjoyed it, all that stuff. And he was very receptive to that and decided to keep me on. And to my surprise, not only did he keep me on, but he also extended the time of my mix show. And I went from having a 1-hour mix show to a 2-hour mix show. And that was actually very challenging. You would think it wouldn't be that challenging, but going from producing 1 hour to 2 hours, it's a lot of work. Those mix shows, kind of a side note, those were done live in my studio. Now, when I say live, the good thing about having a studio is I could do it live, and when I messed up, I could do it again and cut and paste. So they were kind of live, okay? Sometimes I nailed it, didn't have to put it in the DAW, but a lot of times I did. So, of course, I throw it in there too to put station drops in, and this was a good thing that happened for my career too, is the radio station did allow me to promote other things. So they allowed me to lead generate for my wedding DJ business, and they also allowed me to promote my bar gigs, which did help out a lot. I can't take away from that aspect, so which will help illustrate another one of my points later on in this video. But so they did help me do that. That was part of my pay. I will say the pay was pretty low, and we negotiated on it. I was happy with the pay. I was okay with the pay. I don't want to say, by low, I'm not saying that I didn't like it, okay? I'm just saying that it was low for the amount of time I spent on the project. It was definitely those benefits, those other benefits were needed for it to make sense for me to do at the time. So I had the 2-hour mix show. I was able to, like I said, throw in my own drops, my own advertising for my wedding business, etc. And in doing so, I had my own home studio. And in doing so, they heard my voice on the air and asked me if I'd like to be, on-air talent. And of course, it had always been a dream of mine to be on the radio. And so I said, absolutely, I'd love to do it. So now I'm going to get into why you want to do radio. Why do you want to get into the business? Do you want to expand your skill set? Do you want to learn about electronics? Do you want to learn about broadcasting? Do you want to learn about writing copy, advertising? What's your passion? What makes you want to get into this? Do you want to be a star of your own community? And I got to ask you a question. Why do you want to be in radio versus starting your own thing, on a platform like YouTube? There's all kinds of questions that I think anybody should ask themselves before they get into a radio career. Find your why. Find out exactly why you want to do this and make sure it's for you. We're not in the golden age of radio anymore, but radio can still be fun and it can still provide valuable experiences for people, and it can still get your foot in some doors. If you are interested in getting into radio, I would highly suggest too that you start your own socials now. Start branding yourself. If you're a turntablist, get a real strong DJ name that nobody else has. Really start thinking about building your brand online, because at the end of the day, you don't want any potential radio station to basically take over your brand as an individual, right? You want to have control of that. That's actually kind of one of the negative things about radio, is that sometimes you don't get a lot of creative control as far as, programming, forget about it. As just a regular jock, my job as far as programming was just to come up with, something cool to say, something interesting to say in between talk breaks. The playlist was already, filled out, done. That was a top 40 station. You know, I know there are some other niche things that happen on the radio, of course. You know, some radio stations play vinyl, just things like that. But for the most part, you're not going to get that much creative control unless you've been there for a long time and things like that. Another thing that is huge if you're thinking about a career in radio is job security. You know, you got to make sure if you're going to get a job, you get to keep a job, especially when you consider that radio markets are very, very, you know, spread out across the United States. So, you know, I've got a friend of mine who wanted to get a different job and had to move to a different state for a different radio job. And that's something you may have to do. You know, you may have to, you know, up and move to a whole different state in the United States just because you lost your job at some point in radio. So just want you to be aware of that before you give your whole heart and soul to this thing, or before you put all your eggs in one basket. Again, build that brand online, build your brand. Another thing to consider is, you know, how much you're going to get paid to get in the radio, you know, because it is such a tight industry. Sometimes, you know, you may only get in as a part-timer and then really have to struggle for a while to, you know, actually start getting paid more, get more hours, get more work, stuff like that. So you have to consider that you may have to get a second job, or radio may have to be your second job until you can kind of work yourself into more of that field and get some of those jobs. There are other opportunities available in radio, you know, lots of voice work, things like that, for ads, you know, remotes, when you're trying to promote a business, and things like that do pay extra. They can kind of pad your check, and it's really helpful, but you got to move, you know, you've got to move up in the radio industry and move up to get those opportunities, and you got to, you know, do well to keep those opportunities. One thing that has really, really messed up the radio industry for people, and will continue to do so, is automation. Okay, so we're talking about the automated playlist. Okay, that was the first thing, was just, you know, the computer essentially doing the DJ's work as far as playing the music. In essence, that means all the DJ had to do was insert their talk breaks, and it was good. Now automation has gone to a whole new level with AI, and I'm sure there are robot DJs out there right now. You know, I know there are. I've heard of them. I haven't, you know, researched them, gotten into them, but there are robots doing voiceovers now, and I bet there are some that human beings can't even tell that it's a robot. And from a station perspective, in a declining industry, that may be the last straw. And here's something that I've observed too, is that I don't see or haven't seen a lot of newer, younger faces in radio. And I think that has a lot to do with where the industry is. If you think about it, you know, I'm seeing like maybe early 30s, early to mid 30s for the most part in radio, where, you know, I'd see a lot younger crowd back in the day. Okay, like mid 20s, young to mid 20s, even, you know, fresh out of high school, we're getting internships in town. And so, you know, now I'm seeing an older crowd, and I think what that means is that a lot of younger people don't want to be in radio. You know, they've already kind of figured out that they're going to have to do more. You know, and I think a lot too has to do with these older people holding on to these jobs, because if you think about it, if you're in an industry that is declining, then what else are you going to do? Like, you've given your life to this, you've given your life to the technology, you've learned technology along the way, you've learned how to use everything. It is evolving, and I hate to say it, but how many of these people have not evolved? have not evolved with the technology because they haven't had to. I bet it's a staggering figure, and that kind of goes along with what I've said, that I'm sure young kids could jump in there and do, all kinds of things on an app that half of these, people that have been working in radio for 30 years don't even know how to do. So why should you consider radio? Why would this be a good thing for you to do? Well, number one, skill building. You will build your skills. Once you lay down a few radio broadcasts and listen to yourself. Now look, I'm super guilty, by the way, still, okay? I'm still doing this. But once you listen to yourself and listen back to how you speak, you're going to understand that you're not that great at it. At least that's what what happened to me. I realized a lot of things about my, the way I talked and the way I communicated, that I was leaving out some words. I wasn't, my grammar sucked. Just so many things I learned about myself during those times, during those experiences. Networking. You're going to meet a lot of people. You're going to get to know a lot of people. That is one thing that radio definitely has, is, an inside track to a lot of business owners, a lot of influential people in the community. You can rub elbows with these people and, get to know them. And also get to know them in a context where they're probably more comfortable talking to you, probably more comfortable giving you more information about themselves, their businesses, things like that, which can be useful. I do radio, or I've done radio. I do content creation. I do retail. I do all kinds of things. I've learned so much from just listening to people in high places. Okay. Because I've been fortunate enough to essentially be a fly on the wall as a DJ, or be in there as a radio jock, as an MC, whatever. So a lot to be said for that, for sure. Another thing I was really grateful, and I think could have propelled me a little further if I'd wanted to do it and wanted to, chase this, was, meeting some label reps. They would send me, songs for my mix show, stuff they wanted me to push, things like that. They'd email me. They were connected with other people, so you could definitely, as you proceed and get further into the radio industry, it's going to open you up and get you in contact, with more people in the music industry, and that might lead to a better job. That might lead to other opportunities, more work, side hustles, side gigs, all kinds of things. So it's definitely good to always be opening doors for yourself, even if maybe you never walk through them. These points are good for anybody considering radio, but also somebody, for somebody who's already in radio, I think it's worth considering too. I've mentioned build your brand, and in radio, you are a brand. Your personality is the brand, whether you like it or not, Now, that being said, you don't have to be a brand. There are plenty of radio jocks who just phone it in and do the absolute bare minimum between songs and don't create any kind of brand while they're doing it. I'm not talking badly about them either, because I want to say, before radio, I realized that so many DJs did that. Post radio, what I realize is that excellence isn't always necessarily incentivized in radio, meaning you can sit there, for 2 or 3 hours to really program your show and really think about how good of a job that you're going to do, and really, apply all that stuff and really do a great show. Or you can just kind of phone it in and do your parts really fast and get out of there. If you spend too much time, they're going to start asking you why. Why is it costing them extra money, etc. So basically, it's not incentivized to produce a quality show anymore. It's easy to phone it in. So I'm not talking badly about radio jocks here, just the way it is. That being said, one of the other things I thought about when I was, producing my own radio shows was the question kept bothering me. It kept coming up in my mind. What if you were putting this much work into your own content, into your own YouTube channel, into your own podcast? What would the results be long term? Radio gave me that short-term paycheck, but growing a YouTube channel is a long-term endeavor, things like that. So, and as you can see, I'm not going to sit here and brag about my YouTube channel because I've certainly got a long way to go, but it's not bad. I've put some effort into this channel. I'm continuing to try to grow it and create content, things like that, and it's paid off. It's been okay. So I'm really glad that I stopped myself and, really thought about where my energy was going and why maybe I should be doing my own content too. Now, that being said, you can always do your own content. If you're not on the radio, you can make your own content starting now, and that might actually help you land a job later on. Unless you're too good, then it might actually hurt you, believe it or not. I have a story for you. It's loosely based. I'm not going to name any names, but I've heard of a radio DJ who actually has a substantial, YouTube, TikTok, etc. following. And it hasn't really hurt her. It's actually hurt other people trying to get jobs because the radio station realized that gives her so much leverage at her job because she's monetized through all the other platforms, and I think the radio station might need her just as much as she needs them at this point. So it works out really well for her as far as having that leverage. But I've seen ads, help wanted ads from a radio station saying they want somebody who doesn't have that going on. They want somebody who doesn't have a following online. So if you've got too big of a following and you're interviewing for a radio position, you may not want to mention it. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but you may not want to tell them how big you are online because that'll let them know that they don't necessarily have the hold on you that they're going to need to have on you. If you're already on the radio, it's never going to hurt you to start building your own audience off the radio. A friend of mine got let go from the radio station, and he had his radio page that he was promoting for the radio station. So it was this dude on this radio station. Well, when he got let go from the radio station, it changed to this dude on the radio. But he was able to then transition that into other things, and I believe he even started a radio station of his own at one time, online radio station. Did fairly decent for a while, and he was able to kind of take that following with him somewhere. Now, same thing, if you've got a YouTube channel, if you've got Instagram, you've got all this stuff, podcast, you're able to take that following with you somewhere if you're doing it on your own terms, on your own platforms, all that stuff. And that being said, I don't know what the current paperwork is like, anything like that, but I would double check my contract with the radio station too and make sure that something like that wasn't in the contract. That I wasn't able to produce my own content. I wasn't able to grow my own following. That I could see a radio station saying, if you want to have a podcast, it's going to be through us. It's going to be your podcast, but you're going to do it on our website. We're going to get all the web traffic, blah, 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 blah. So, you got to be careful what deals you enter in. I would be an absolute liar if I said that, being on the radio and going through all that didn't help me produce my YouTube content. So, if you're on the radio now, use those skills. Get in there. Video's not that hard. If you know audio, you can do video too. So yeah, get in there and start working on that stuff. Producing my own radio shows really helped me too with the workflow. Being able to chop things up, and get that final product out and get it out efficiently. These podcast episodes, for instance, they take me a while to shoot, but hopefully by the time I'm done, I've only got maybe 3 to 5 hours in each episode, and the watch time and views, thankfully are going above and beyond what I need them to make it, viable. So, but yeah, radio will help you get your workflow down, and that can kind of suck too, though, because one thing I learned in radio was that, the more efficient I became, the less I got paid. So if I could track my show in, 30 minutes versus an hour, or a quality show where I spent a couple hours, I didn't see a benefit in that. So, one could argue that maybe it shouldn't take a certain amount of time, or maybe I just wasn't good enough yet. There's certainly that argument too. So I'm not going to leave that out. But I don't think you're very much incentivized for being efficient. One thing somebody could do too, if you're already in radio, is use some, behind the scenes clips of your experience in radio, to kind of let people know what it's like, give them a look and see what it's like. But I would say also be creative when you do it, because what's a behind the scenes reel? I see so many, radio jocks, trying to do behind the scenes stuff, and really all they're doing is talking on the mic and showing people how they broadcast their show, or showing the studio or anything like that. We all know now it's just a broom closet with some branding inside of it, and some electronic equipment. So I think you got to do better than that. I think there are some people who do better than that. But really think outside the box when you're creating your content for your personal brand as a radio jock, so that you can, kind of put yourself above and beyond the herd, most of the other people. Set yourself apart. Nobody notices normal. Something else you can do to help your radio DJ career, or if you're trying to get into it, is do your own mobile stuff. Become a mobile DJ, do weddings, private parties, corporate events, all that stuff. It's going to teach you how to use equipment. It's going to teach you how to address crowds. It's going to teach you how to be an MC. It's going to teach you how to market. It's going to teach you how to handle tough situations, tough people, hecklers, all kinds of stuff. And it's going to be good for you. It's going to teach you how to run your own business. So I would definitely advise doing all those things to, supplement your radio career, or quite frankly, to move on from your radio career if it gets to that point. Some of those jobs can be pretty lucrative, and, some of you radio people can do far better than what you're paid for, and, really make a difference out there. So I would highly recommend, people getting into that stuff, or starting their own mobile DJ companies and things like that. Again, you'll probably have to check your paperwork with your specific station, so that you're not in competition with them. But if you're not, you can really do well for yourself in that way, and continue to build your own audience versus an audience for somebody else. So I think the biggest takeaways from this video, if you are considering a career in radio, are to be smart about your decision. Negotiate well. Really, really look at everything, and I'm talking about the terms of the job. Don't just think in terms, if you get an offer, don't think in terms of today and what you want right now and being excited, but ask yourself, will I be happy with these same terms in 6 months? Be honest with yourself. Will I be happy with these same terms in a year? And if you can say yes to those things, then jump on it. Another takeaway, make it work for you, right? Make radio work for you. So use it to push your own personal brand too. You don't have to use radio for that, but make it a symbiotic relationship. Let them use you for your talent. You use them to push your own brand. And number 3, diversify. Diversify your skill set. Learn the equipment, learn the marketing, learn everything you can about broadcasting, so that if something happens, if you're let go, if you have to move, whatever, you're more skilled and can get more jobs in the industry, or you can pivot out of one job into something else. Set yourself up for success, and that really goes for any kind of career. Don't get too comfortable, and always stay learning. That's going to help you a lot too, no matter what you do. So that being said, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I hope you liked this video. If you did, check out my other stuff. It's all over the place. Also, please like, subscribe, share with somebody else who's in radio. And if you do have any comments about it or any questions for me, let me know down in the description. There are certainly, I'm sure, some different points of view. So let's address those too. Why not? You're here, I'm here, let's do it. Anyway, thanks again for checking out this episode, and I will catch you next time.